Welcome back, gentlemen. This is the conclusion to reading 6 of Caesar's Gallic Wars. We're going to pick up where we left off last video at line 119. We just talked about in 108 to 118 about the storm and the tide that destroyed much of Caesar's ships. Now we're going to look at how the British found out about this and what they did in response. So the first sentence, as you can see, is a long one. So we're going to just read through it and then we'll pick it apart and see what we have going on here. So just to read the Latin, again, you can please follow along, try to just listen and see if you can get a gist of what Caesar's trying to tell us here. Quibus rebus cognitis, principes Britanniae, qui post prolium ad Caesarem convenerant, inter se conlucuti, cum equites in et naves et firmentum Romanis deesset intelligerent, et pacitatem militum ex castrorum exiguitate cognoscerent. Optimum factu esse, duxerunt rebellione facta, fermento comiatoque nostros prohibere, et rem inhiemem producere. Quae superatis autoritu interclusis neminum postea belli inferendi causa in Britanniam transitorum confidebant. Okay, so start off, look at the verbs that Caesar uses in this sentence. You see that convenerant is the first verb, and it means to come or gather. And then intelligerent, believe it or not, means to understand. Intelligent comes from that word, understand. Cognoscere, cognoscerent comes from cogno. It means to learn, so a very similar word. Duxerunt is going to be they thought, or it means to lead, but in this idiomatic context, it's like to think or to judge. And then confidebant comes from confido. It means to trust. So you see, we have a lot of verbs of thinking, knowing, feeling in this passage, so you should automatically expect to see a few indirect statements. Let's see what we do. So that's the verbs. Then we'll go to the subjects of each verb. Principes is the first subject of the verb convener, of the verb intelligerent, also the verb cognoscerent, as well as duxerunt and confidebant. So it really acts as a subject of all the verbs in the sentence, except for convenerant, which takes the subject as qui, which is a relative pronoun which refers back to principes. So really, it all goes back to principes. So let's go through what the nouns mean here, the subjects. Principes means chieftains. These are the British chieftains we talked about before. Qui, of course, means who, and refers back here to the principes. So that's the subjects. As far as the objects, we have a couple objects. Again, as I said, we have indirect statements with these verbs of thinking, knowing, feeling. So intelligerent, understand, that obviously is a thinking, knowing, feeling verb, and it comes with a couple objects as subjects. So equites, naves, and fermentum are the subject object of that indirect statement that goes to the essay. And then we have just a straight direct object of cognoscerent, which is palcitatum, means the smallness, the small number. And then duxerunt also introduces an indirect statement, optimum the factu esse, and so optimum acts as the accusative subject of the indirect statement, factum esse. And then prohibere nostros, so nostros is a direct object of prohibere, and rem is a direct object of producere. And then we have neminum as the object of confidebant, and then transitorum is kind of the predicate accusative of neminum, which means to cross. So when we put it all together, we have a little bit more of a senses that makes sense. All the purple are going to be the infinitives that are part of the indirect object. So I'll try to make it clear how they go together. So the first clause, quibus rebus cognitis, you should recognize as an adverb absolute, which it is. That's what you like to start off with. So the princes, the principes. Oops, sorry. I didn't mean to do that. Hey, go back. So first, the princes, the principes of Britain, principes Britanniae. So with which things having been learned, as quibus rebus cognitis, with which things having been learned, the principes, the chieftains of Britain, then we have the relative clause, who had come, convenerant, after the battle, as post Portland, to Caesar. They had inter se conlocuti, they had talked among themselves, and when, cum, so cum clause, a cum temporal clause, when they understood, until the gerund. Now we have the first indirect statement, from equites to the esse. So when they understood that the horses and ships and grain, the esse were lacking for the Romans, and when they had understood, or learned, cognoscerent, about the small number of soldiers, pacitatum militum, militum is 30 punchin genitive plural. Then they had learned the small number of soldiers from X, the smallness, as exiguitate, from the smallness of the camp, castrorum. They thought it would be best to, they thought duxerent, and then optima factu esse is to be best to do. And then we have an absolute snuck in there, with a rebellion having been made. They thought it would be best to prohibit us, nostros prohibere, from grain and supplies, fermento et commiatatu, and they thought it was best to push the matter into winter, which, with us being conquered, or with our retreat closed off, interclusis, they were confidevant, that niminem, no one, afterwards, postea, for the sake of bringing war, belli intervendi causa, no one would cross into Britain. So again, that's a doozy of a sentence, and I expect some questions on that one in class. But hopefully you got what you need from that one. If not, you can watch it again and slow me down. Alright, so let's go to the next reading, which is, I believe, the last of the reading for this chapter. Itaque versus coniuratone facta palatum ex castris descedere ac suos clam ex agris deducere quiparent. Short little sentence. We see here that one verb is corporant, which means they began, and then we go to the object, which is suos, which is their own. Oddly, you see there's no subject here, so you can assume that the subject is still going to be the principes Britanniae. So they began. Let's look at it all together now. We have a couple infinitives that are complementary to the verb began. So they began to descedere, withdraw, okay, and deducere, to lead away. So let's just take it physics. So itaque is in so. Russus is again. So he was getting bored, but Britain's starting rebellions. And so again, with the coniuratione facta, that's an absolute, with the conspiracy having been made, they began to withdraw ex castris from their camps, and palatim is this a little bit, it's an adverb, and they began to lead their own guys, suos, from the fields. These Britons live in the field all day, and they come in to fight. And they did so clam, secretly. Alright, so we have another war of brewing with the Gauls, which we will complete this week and be ready for the exam. Alright, again, I expect some questions and fill out your study guides, and we should be good to go for class. Alright, ciao bella.